Hello and welcome back to B-Roll Redux. How's it going, David?
Hey, good morning, David. How are you?
I am doing good. I'm doing good.
Good. Good.
Hair's getting
Hey,
all
David, yeah.
Gene Wildery over here,
Look,
I guess.
look at my hand. Look, my hand is. I need some lighting. Need some lighting.
So
How's
yeah,
the
we,
weather
we have
down
a good
there?
movie today.
Oh yeah, it's a great movie, Dave. Thank you very much for that one.
And it's kind of like in spirit with what we watched, last episode with Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer, right?
With
Yeah,
the fan theory
I'm
of being a sequel to this movie.
right. I'm looking. I went into Copilot and they got some notes here. So it was interesting. It was a fun movie. It just yeah. Let's talk about
Yeah,
it.
so we're talking about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which is from
1971, right?
1971.
You weren't even born yet.
No, I had like 11 more years for that.
I was still in Pittsburgh. I don't even remember watching this movie. I don't remember, but it was interesting. Interesting. And like I
Well,
said,
I mean, there was a lot of controversy when it came out. I mean, there was controversy about the book, because the Oompa Loompas were African pygmies. So he changed them in the book to be just white-skinned little people.
right.
Then the movie takes a lot of liberties. The movie takes so many liberties with the book. I never read the book, but Robert Dahl, the writer, he
But he was
notoriously
upset. Yeah,
hates this movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was definitely upset. That's right. I did read that in your notes. Yeah.
Well, he refused to watch it. So it's hard to say if he would have watched it and he says, okay, yeah, that's a good rendition.
Right.
It's not true to his book, but it's still got that magic to it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think if he would have sat there and watched it objectively,
Hmm.
I think he would have appreciated it.
Right.
And
Well,
it
I
wasn't
think that's
supposed to
what
be a
people do.
musical. I
Right.
mean,
No. Yeah. Right.
at this time, Mary Poppins, The Wizard of Oz were doing well, so producers, wanted it to be a musical. So
Yeah.
the director went along. I mean, only one of the songs felt out of place,
Which
like
one was that?
forced in there. Like the one where the Charlie's mother was singing about like, Lucky Charlie or something like that. And Charlie Bucket was just walking down the street of the city just at night and there's like no one around and it just felt odd, right? But
Yeah.
all the other songs felt like, yeah, I mean, it moved the story along. It felt right. If it was just a straight fantasy adventure, what would they do? They go into that room and he's gonna give exposition of what every single piece of candy is in the candy room.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
oh, that's clearly a giant gummy bear, right? It's like, that's whipped cream in there. He doesn't have to say, what everything is made of and stuff like that. That would just kind of be boring, right? I mean, so the songs were kind of, I always thought, I'm not a big musical person, but I always thought they made the story, flow.
Hmm. Yeah.
Less dialogue and exposition and more just, kids enjoying eating and then singing, right? I mean, it was just perfectly fine, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But is this the first time you've actually seen it?
First time. Yeah. First time I've seen it. Yeah. I mean, I haven't even seen the one with Johnny Depp. It was. I don't remember. I wouldn't have been as a kid. I don't remember. I mean, I remember watching movies, but yeah, not this one, 1971. Goodness gracious. So it would have been something I would have seen, but I was always outside. I didn't see many movies when I was a kid.
Well,
We used to go to
Charlie
the
and Chocolate
movies.
Factory with Johnny Depp was actually truer to the book, I've heard.
Was it?
Um, but I mean, not a lot of people saw this in the theaters when it came out. This
Right. Well,
movie
yeah, it's got a
was
bigger
independently
cult following.
funded.
Right.
It cost 3 million to make, and it only made 4 million at the box office.
Right. It's got a
It
cult following and DVD. I mean, I'm sure VHS and DVD sales really helped.
Oh yeah, and that's what it started with the TV reruns because of
Mhm.
of course before VHS came out, it's in syndication.
Right.
71, 72, it's already, on TV, on
Mhm.
stations, on TBS, CNT, whatever was out there back
Right.
then.
Yeah, the big three we had.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the distribution, I mean, distribution was handled by Paramount, and they were not happy with the box office, of course. So they allowed the distribution rights to lapse. So by the time, we're getting closer to the 80s, I think it was like 1977, Warner Brothers picked up the distribution
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
they
that's right.
wanted to increase their home catalog, collection. And then by the time VHS came out and, movie rentals came out, it was one of the bigger movie rentals in the
Really.
80s.
Mm.
So that made Warner Brothers quite a bit of money,
Interesting.
and of course made the producers and stuff like that of this film money, down the line, which, not like I said, now it's a cult classic.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of people know it, and like I said, a lot of the controversy probably affected it, the box office, and it's not like today where the word of mouth is so much easier to get around. People go see the movie in 1971. It's like, well, they're only telling a very close knit that's like, oh, this is a great movie.
Right.
Now we can have everyone can share their opinion. They get online and
Instantly, you're right.
yeah, and now you can actually get it. The critics, at least the one critic that I read, he only gave it 2 stars. I mean, I think it's more that line where it's like it's so many genres that they didn't choose a lane, right? It's not really musical, it's not really a fantasy, it's not really, drama or comedy, and I think back then that was a bigger taboo than it is,
Yeah,
nowadays.
because yeah. Well,
But
let's talk about the.
what?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, the other the well, I was talking to we have a window guy here, and he was talking about had to have something for the adults, but now it's some of the it seems kind of creepy now. It is kind of maybe kind of uneasy watching it. This some of the maybe the mannerisms or the way he communicated with the kids. It seems kind of odd now watching it. Which was I don't know.
Yeah, I
That's I
mean
guess
that's a
it
different
gave
era,
right,
and like I said, I never saw it too creepy, but I did kind of get that a little at the end where it's like, man, yeah, you probably wouldn't play that nowadays.
right,
Um, but he was almost looking for a child, right? He's looking for an heir. So
right,
it's like, is he talking to these kids like a way like a parent would, at one time,
right.
and that's how I imagine it, especially at the end. Like I said, I got that feeling at the end when when he's talking to Charlie, but it's like, it's like, yeah, it's his kind of like son. He's kind of almost adopting him right now. Right?
Right. But when with Charlie and then the demise of the other kids, the kids drowning, it's like, but there's just no mention of, they just went away. And it's like,
Oh
what
yeah,
the heck?
I just love his reaction. He's like they're doing something. He's like, no, stop, please.
Yeah, right.
Very
That
dryly.
just
He's like he's not
just
trying. It's
kind
like,
of
well,
weird.
I'm sure
It just
they did die.
yeah, this are they mixed it and it's like what's that movie, Soylent Green? Are they part of the candy now? So
I mean,
that's what makes the candy so
it
special.
always seemed like the Oompa Loompas were, going to the right place to get them out, right? And
But you
uh,
never saw them again. You never saw. I mean, even at the
oh
end.
yeah, they lost the contest. I
Yeah.
mean,
But what happened to
if
them?
you
Where
if
did
you
they
trip
go?
and fall and injure yourself during a tour, you go to the medical tent. The tour is going to continue, and you're just going to miss it.
Right.
Like I'm
But
not going to redo the
just kind of
tour,
curious. There's no mention of them. Hey, hope you enjoyed yourself. Sorry you hurt yourself, but try again next year. Just they were just gone.
Hey, they signed that contract. That's why yeah, that's why you have those waivers, right?
Right. It was just kind of for me it's unsettling. I don't
I
know. So
think that
maybe
I
it's
mean, that was a
bad,
little bit of the point. It's supposed to be unsettling. It's supposed to be kind of
but
like weird, right? And he's eccentric, and
not as a murderer. I mean, just like
I mean
he's.
he
What
didn't
about
murder
OSHA?
him. It's
Huh?
like he said don't touch the chocolate, and the kid could have stopped at any time, and or he said you don't want to eat that,
Right.
chewing gum. She goes, I know what I'm doing. It's like he gave him one warning, and that was it. I mean,
he did, right. He's definitely not a parent. It just, yeah. I mean, it was an interesting movie. I've always liked Gene Wilder, uh, and it's hard not to see. Well, this is 1971. He hadn't done anything. What was Young Frankenstein or
I mean, that had to be earlier, I think, than
yeah,
71. No, I mean, that could have been like 75-ish.
yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I've
Blazing
always liked
Saddles, I
Gene.
always thought was in the 60s now.
I guess maybe I'll need to read it, but it just I enjoyed watching it because we have to, for this, but it didn't. I don't know. I didn't enjoy it. And as a filmmaker, you watch it, but as a would I recommend it to a kid now today? No, maybe an adult. This seemed kind of creepy to
I
me.
would think I think I would recommend it to kids. I mean, because it's I mean, if you see the kid movies nowadays, they're made for people that have like ADHD, right? I mean,
Well,
just so
then they're
much
made to
going
go to
on so quick, and I think that doesn't help brain development.
right,
I think the older kids' stories, that were told with good pacing and good timing,
right,
they deal with a little bit more, you know, adult matters in a kid's way.
right,
I mean, yeah, you don't know if these kids are, these kids die or something like that, but it teaches you a lesson. It's like, hey, when someone tells you no, there
right.
might be a good
No,
reason for it, right?
right. Well, and I'm just thinking, I guess the part of the movie I didn't like is when they actually go inside when it's a closed environment. But I did enjoy the lead up to all the stories coming into it. I enjoyed those. But I was kind of why are the parents and the grandparents still in bed? That was that ever talked
I
about?
mean, the they were very poor, so their
Right,
diet probably wasn't very nutritious. I think
right.
they
But
were
it
eating
just
like
kind of just
cabbage
found out
soup or
that
something like that. So it's just cabbage
right.
and water. So I mean, they're probably bedridden because of nutrition and being so old.
It was just kind of an odd.
Yeah. Well, he mentioned that he hadn't stand or walked for like 20 years. That I didn't
Yeah,
know.
it's like
So it's like you've been in
yeah,
that
it's
bed for
like
20 years,
right.
all four of y'all,
It
you know,
stinks.
but that's what I imagine. It's like, yeah, they were just, not a whole bunch of space. There's nowhere to go, but yeah, it's just whimsical, right? I mean, it's a kid's story.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that part of I liked all the stories and the Veruca. Daddy, I want this.
Yeah,
The
and all the
kids showed up
kids
to,
had the good stereotypes. All the kids kind of had,
yeah, typical kid
the
stereotype.
archetype of different kids,
Right, right,
that you see in other things, like
right,
Harry Potter and other various, you
right. Well,
know,
I see it here with Audrey and Sean, two different people with two different personalities. Want or give. Yeah, it was interesting. I like the lead up to it, and yeah, I like reading about the special effects. The Chocolate River. You know,
yeah. I mean that's crazy. Where it's like, well, they were trying something else, but it kept on turning out blood red, so they actually
right.
had to use
They put cream in
water,
it. Yeah,
chocolate, and milk.
right.
The milk kept on spoiling, so by
Oh, can you
the
imagine the stink?
production end, it was so
Ugh,
spoiled, rotten.
ugh,
It stunk up
nasty, right?
everything.
And the girl turned into a blueberry. I mean, it was fun to watch. It just I go into it a little bit biased, and that's hard to take that filter off sometimes. But I did watch the entire movie. I found it. It wasn't. They took it off Tubi, but I found it on Max. So I
Yeah, it
finished
was
it
on
the last
HBO
couple minutes on there.
Max.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think you could rent it on Amazon, but
right,
that's why I watched it on HBO because
right,
like I said, Warner Brothers bought the distribution rights in '77 for its
right.
catalog.
So
So people
what about
think
this
it's
other
a
movie?
Warner
That,
Brothers picture, but it really wasn't. It was
right,
actually a Quaker Oats movie
right, Quaker Oats, right,
who were trying to who were looking for a movie to actually do product placement. So they
hmm
were trying to do that product placement long before Spielberg did it with Reese's Pieces and E.T.
right,
So they actually spent a lot of money to produce this movie, and they were going to bring out a candy bar at the same time.
right.
But someone messed up the
Yeah, the
makeup
formula, yeah,
of the candy bar, and it kept
right.
on melting on the shelves.
It melting, right.
So
Yeah,
they failed at that. But I'm sure they made some money on the back end, like I said, from Warner Brothers through distribution of like VHS and stuff like that. But they either Quaker Oats is sold around, but I think they sold the rights to the Wonka brand to whoever is owned by like Nestle or something like that now,
Okay. Yeah.
who turned the Wonka brand into actual success,
Right.
like
Knows how to
in
make chocolate.
2011 or something like that.
Right. Right. Right.
Because I remember actually Wonka bars coming out, which might have been with like the Johnny Depp movie. So eventually someone did what Quaker Oats wanted to do. And I think Quaker Oats could have, if they actually made a good product, they probably could have made a lot of money during that candy.
Right.
Because I remember, I think at the time I was working at like Walgreens when the Wonka bars came out. It's like we couldn't keep those off the shelf.
Really.
I think they even ran a some kind of contest, like a golden ticket contest, like in the movie.
Right.
I don't know what you want with it,
Speaking of
but
golden
what
ticket,
they can do to tie in, right?
right. Now, that's now. I never got the reference on The Office when Michael did the golden ticket for all the paper, and that one company got all the tickets. He got in trouble for that. So let's talk about the Snowpiercer and the use of children.
Well,
Right. It was.
you
I
see
get
the
that.
Oompa Loompas. Oompa Loompas were definitely like the size of children,
Right.
and they ran all the machines. I mean, they had to do some creative workings because that bike in the mixing room in Wonka, Gene Wilder was on, but that was actually supposed to be an Oompa Loompa running that, but
Oh,
all the
it
Oompa
did.
Loompas were too short, so
Right.
they had to
Yeah.
think
Yeah. I saw
creatively.
that
It's like, okay, let's
the
just put
legs
Gene
wouldn't.
Wilder on there.
Yeah. The legs wouldn't reach the pedals. Yeah.
So
That was
yeah, I
funny.
mean, Oompa Loompas were the workers, and in the movie you heard it's like, the grandpa told the story where it's like, one day he closed the factory, all the workers came home, then when factory started up again, no workers ever went in.
Right.
So who's doing all the work? Oompa Loompas.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah. The factory just it was closed when what's his name? Charlie went by. It
Yeah.
was filmed in
So,
Germany.
well, it was filmed in Germany, but the town was never named in the
Right.
movie. So it
Right.
was
Right.
supposed to be just like a place that was, for the American people, something unfamiliar where it's like, yeah,
Right.
you don't really know where that is.
Yeah.
You know? Um, but on the gate, you saw that W kind of logo,
Hmm.
so it's like, well, you saw that logo in Snowpiercer. That Veruca, wearing a meat coat. She was always fancy. That's always thought, it's like maybe that's Tilda Swinton's character in Snowpiercer, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like, well, she could exist. Like I said, she dropped down, and it was either the furnace or or the garbage, right?
Right.
So it's like, just went in the garbage.
Right.
I mean, um, probably, she could have learned a lesson, but she also could have been, while she's still, kind of a rich spoiled brat, who knows how long her father's peanut factory works for, and
Right.
Charlie's a nice person.
Right.
Maybe they,
We never.
became friends, right?
Right.
Charlie became super rich at the end of Willy Wonka. What's he gonna do
Right.
with all that money? You know,
Right. Right.
um,
I
then
think it's
Plum, with Violet, I mean, the stretch, I think she would have been a lot older, maybe, because she wasn't like, Tilda Swinton, Ed Harris's age, but you
right.
know, could have been, children of children.
Right.
Um, and of course, Chris Evans' character in Snowpiercer is not the age of children,
Right.
but in Snowpiercer, it still goes along that theme of like, finding that next generation to take over.
Hmm. Right. They take over. Right. Running the
And
machine.
in Snowpiercer, it's you got a little bit more harder decisions to make than running
Right.
a chocolate factory. A
Right.
kid could probably run a chocolate factory. It didn't seem like, Willy Wonka was going anywhere for a while. So, he was probably going to raise Charlie a little bit,
Hmm.
right? So it's like he said he couldn't do it forever. but he didn't say it's like I'm retiring now. I'm giving you everything. And I'm going to go travel the world.
Right.
So it was all about just like finding that next generation, and they're going to be the ones that go forward in the future.
Yeah. It was fun. I mean, it was fun to watch, just, but yeah, it was fun. I'm just
Oh
waiting for
yeah,
the,
I mean I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Gene Wilder's singing, and I enjoy the creative process of how you make a film back then. With him drinking that flour, cup and then just eating
right,
it,
right,
and
right, right.
it's wax, so
Mhm.
he's chewing that wax, taking it, for his art, and then as soon as that
Right,
hit cut, so you spit it,
right, right. Like those,
or licking wallpaper. It's like, well, that's just
yeah,
wallpaper, so they're just licking the wall, So
right,
it's like, you're doing things that other people were like, I'm not gonna do that. And it's like, no, just
right.
just do it. Do it for the sake of
Just
art.
do it.
This is why you get
Yeah,
paid to do what you're doing.
right.
And I enjoyed, the reading stories and reading parts of their, the books and like, what happens and during production, and
Right,
all the tricks that they use for the production, like the director not telling the kids and the other actors like what's coming up next.
right. So it gets
Like
too
Gene
hard
Wilder
to surprise.
singing in the tunnel scene, getting all creepy. That everyone was thought he was having a psychotic episode. It's like, well, so all those reactions are real. And that's always usually a good trick for kids, because you never know what kind of performance you get out of younger kids.
Right,
That when you do that spontaneity and you're looking for like an authentic reaction, it's like, well, that's
right.
one way to go.
You got to keep the camera rolling, right? Keep it
Yeah.
rolling.
So
I
yeah,
think
like
it's,
I enjoyed it for that. I enjoyed how this is filmmaking at its hardest, but it's at its shiniest when you actually pull it off.
yeah, it was fun. I give it a 2.5 slices.
2.5. You sound like that critic back then.
I'll just,
I'll give it a solid 3.5, 4, just
okay,
because, like I said, I think it's a very solid kids movie. It's got the songs, it's got the pretty things on screen, it's got all the archetypes of children, from A to B. So it doesn't matter what kind of kid you are, you probably relate to one of them
right.
on screen. You know, um. So do you think Snowpiercer
I think it's a
sequel?
stretch. I think it's a stretch. I think people
Well,
look,
yeah, it's going to be a stretch, but
I mean, just,
what you have to choose one way or the other. You think it could be, or no,
no, yeah, no,
like 0%. It like it couldn't be.
zero. You have to say zero.
Mm. I'm gonna have to go. Yeah,
The
I'm gonna have to go.
only thing you
Yeah.
have in similarity is a W. I mean, I think that's maybe. I mean, you have to look at the like who started this idea.
Well,
Uh,
it's gonna be fans,
I
and
mean, but
these
you
are
have to find
fans
that
that
one
that
that one
turn things
person.
into cult classics, right?
Right,
The small space, the kids actually, being in small spaces to run the machines. Even that big core that came out of Snowpiercer at the front, it's like a kid had to go in there. It wasn't made for an
right.
adult, so all these
They were,
intricate
but
parts are actually made
they don't.
for little
But
people.
The Oompa Loompas are adults. They're just little people.
Yeah, but he said what kept the parts that kept the thing running were went extinct. So the Oompa Loompas died off. You ran out of snozberries, or whatever. So it's like they
I'm gonna consult ChatGPT and see what it
I
thinks.
mean, it's a stretch, but I
It is.
still believe that he meant to put that stuff in there where it's like, yeah, he was putting stuff in there to link it to possibility.
Well, yeah, I forgot about the director.
Where it's like,
I
yeah,
don't
he's
know.
like, is the story a sequel? No. Is there hints that in the world of possibilities that it's like, okay, this could happen in that world?
Okay, well, I'll
That
give you that. Right. But I mean, again, you have to know I forgot about the director's. It could have been his. But did he ever say?
he
I
never
don't remember seeing
said,
that.
but when he was asked the question, all he did was turn to the camera and smile.
Oh, then there's
So
your
it's like
answer.
he
Yeah.
likes it either way or not. If he meant it,
Right.
he likes the fact that people are actually getting it, and if it's not,
Right.
he liked the fact that people are so engaged in his art that they're feeling something. They're seeing something
Right.
more than he thought of. And that's always a
Right.
positive
Well,
thing.
if they came with if they came with him with that idea, and then he said, "Well, it's in his mind thinking, well, this is going to get me more publicity for the movie," then yes, it is. Then turn to the camera and wink. Yeah. If not, he's going to say, "No, you crazy! This is my original idea." So if he's smart enough to realize that this could generate
Either
revenue,
way helps him. Yeah, and
either way, yeah, either way, help. But
yeah.
and it
Either
provides
he likes
for
people that seeing what he sees, or he enjoys the fact that people are like engaging in it in his film.
right. Right. Yes, so it's
And
a win-win. All right, so I'll
that's
give you
the
one
main
percent,
goal. He's like, you want people to engage with your film, with your story, and if they see something in your story,
and to
you
talk
know
about it, and people
that's
to go
art,
watch.
right?
Yeah.
But I feel it like super positive. Where it's like, yeah, I mean, you don't know how an everlasting Godstopper was truly made. It's like, well, it's like one of all those chemicals that he was using. I mean, he was making candy by just throwing coats. It's like, oh, it's too cold. And he throws a coat in the mixture, to heat
Right.
it up. Or he needs something with the kick. He puts some soccer shoes in there. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was super weird, super kind of
Right.
like on the magical side, and who knows what the chemistry is behind all this stuff.
Right.
Um, I still think that like the big connection to them is like the Oompa Loompas,
Yeah.
going extinct, using that word for inanimate objects all of a sudden felt kind of odd, and Ed Harris's character Wilfred was clearly, eccentric, the whole train was eccentric, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and just just the themes. I mean, the themes of it were kind of spot on. Who who knows? Like I said, I haven't read the graphic novels of Snowpiercer, but I doubt all of like the beats, were the same. Yeah, I guarantee he took a lot of liberties with it.
Right.
Um, dealing. I mean, I'm sure the graphic novel dealt with like classism and stuff like that. Because a lot of things back then did. But the various things with like hiding messages in the bars, and you know going through different kind of like well, they didn't really go through trials, and they didn't get in danger because of what something they did, but just those various themes. There's 3 4 themes that they kind of share, and it's not a far stretch to see it, I think, you
Okay.
know which makes me enjoy them both. And
Right.
like I said, both of them are not masterpieces, but you put them together and they kind of almost become something else.
Don't don't
Especially
don't.
with the juxtaposition of the tones,
Hmm.
and how, one generation of the world is this way, and how the future could turn out, and not necessarily, it wasn't like Wilford's fault that's, the ice age happened. He was actually doing something to save people. So out of the goodness of his heart, he made this train to save people from this.
Here's something for you. Okay, all the chocolate,
But
all the
it's not easy. Heavy is the crown, right? Especially in that circumstances where you have to deal with, we only have so much food.
mhm.
What are we going to do? People are giving birth. People are, we're growing and growing and growing population. It's like, that's a lot more difficult scenarios than you were ever dealing with, like running a chocolate factory,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, I mean, I think people need to watch both of them. You know, judge for themselves. Let's put it that way. you
Yeah,
know,
I agree. I agree.
and just keep an open mind. Like I said, they both fit separately with each other, but they also kind of fit with each other, in my opinion.
Mhm. I agree.
All right,
So what are
so
we going to watch
you
next
want to tell
week?
people where we can
Huh?
actually see our podcast? You can
Well,
see us
where are we got?
on,
iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast. What did I say? iHeartRadio.
yeah,
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio. Yeah,
I
so
watch it on
every
some
Friday at 6 p.m. we should be
6
airing.
p.m. Central Standard Time. Yeah.
And leave a comment, ask us what kind of movie we want. Maybe we'll do some other different things. And we were talking about maybe I think we need to watch one of these old movies that may be good, maybe not.
Let's do some old gangster movies with film noir movies. I like always like those with the shadow.
Chinatown, it was a good one.
Well, the further back. I mean, black and white.
Further back than Chinatown. Chinatown was 70 something.
You dirty rat. Machine guns.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll put
Al
some on the
Capone's guy.
list. We'll have to look at it.
All this free. It's gotta be free.
See you next week.